Hello again everybody, and welcome back to my workshop. And in this video we're going to have a look at a particular example of a throttle to elevator mix. Richard writes to me, and he's a new Jeti user. Hello Richard. And says that he would like the throttle to mix to the elevator under very special circumstances. And I thought this was worth a video because we can really make quite a good program. If you're new to Jeti, you might see some things that you didn't realize you can do with a Jeti radio, some of the features in the programming. And if you've done a reasonable bit of programming, it might be a good refresher of some of the things you may have forgotten you can do, and some ideas. Okay, so what are Richard's requirements? Well, Richard has some large, very powerful tugs for aero towing. I like you already, Richard, because I absolutely adore scale glider aero towing. And we're always on the lookout for people with tug planes who like to do the towing. Anyway, his tow planes have very powerful flaps when coming in to land. And if he has to go around and goes up to full power, the pitch up of these models is very severe. So at that stage, what he would like is obviously a throttle to elevator mix to put in some down elevator trim to compensate for that. But that this mix only happens when the flaps are in the fully down position, of course, fair enough, and that once the climb is established and he switches from landing flap to takeoff flap or no flap, that the mix doesn't just suddenly disappear because his flaps are slowed. So the mix has to come out at the same rate as the slowing of the flaps. Yep. Can Jeti do that? Yes, of course it can. It's a Jeti. And in fact, we can do quite a bit better in making it easy to use and useful program. So let's go into it. My model is a standard 2 flaps, 2 ailerons type, and I'm going to use the method of controlling the flaps, which is to use flight modes controlling the butterfly flap menu. If you have not seen that, I shall put a link to it at the end of this video. It's episode 3 of my series on controlling the flaps of a model, and in most circumstances, not every circumstance, but in most circumstances, it is by far the best way of doing it because it allows you the flight mode separate elevator trims as well, that everything goes at the speed of the flight modes. So in order to do that, flaps have no control. Obviously Jeti will assign a control when you create the model, remove it. And then we have our flight modes. So we need to create those. So ping, yep. And I'll just remove that. I'll call it L for landing. And for the sake of seeing this in the demonstration, I'll give them a 3-second delay each time. That'll be the landing flap. That one we'll call T for takeoff flap. Again, I'll give it a 3-second delay. Just make it nice and slow for the sake of the demonstration. And then the default, normal, cruise, whatever you like to call it. Oops, we'll give it a 3-second delay as well. Okay, and therefore I can go to my butterfly flaps. Control will be log max. Okay, I don't want an offset, no delays, but it's got to be flight mode separate. Okay, and then I can come down and do my flaps in default mode, no flaps. Go to takeoff mode. I'll give it, for the sake of the demonstration, 50% flap, and at landing mode, for the sake of the demonstration, we'll give you 100% flap. Okay, and what else would we be doing? We would be doing digital trim elevator would be separate as well. Right, so far so good. If we have a look at the servo monitor, there's our flap servos, there's landing flap, 3 seconds slow to get takeoff flap, and a 3 seconds slow to get back to neutral. Okay, and our elevator is that one there, and you can imagine that when we're in landing flap, we're going to be trimming some distance forward, might be backwards. I'll trim forward for the sake of this, and so that disappears slowly as we remove the flaps. Right, now for our mixer then. It's going to be from throttle. It defaults to a throttle asymmetric mix. Yes, that's what you want. In other words, instead of the mix going up and down from mid throttle, it goes all one way from bottom throttle, which is normally what you'd want with a throttle mix. Again, not always, but most of the time. To the elevator. Right, come down here. Master value. Now, if you just stick a value in here, say plus or minus 20%, then you are going to get that amount of mix in it. Incidentally, I forgot we should change this to separate. That's the real beastie. So we will now get a master value per flight mode. I'll just show you. So it's 0% at normal flight, 0% at takeoff mode. Go to landing mode. I can go in here and give it some value. And if I change the flight mode, see, it changes back to a different thing. And because we've made it flight mode separate, you get a master value, a switch, and a curve, each totally independent in each flight mode. But you're thinking, okay, I don't know what value I want to put in there. I'm going to have to fly and take a guess, and was it up or down trim or whatever. And I don't want it applying from the very moment of, coming off idle throttle, because I'm going to be coming in on some amount of power, and I don't want the mix there because I've used my flight mode separate trims to do that. I don't want the mix to come in until, let's say, I've got up to half throttle. Okay, we can deal with all of this. Put in there a value of 100%. Now, make the switch one of the sliders. I'm going to use the one on the right, P5. I just move it. I need it to be proportional. There we go. What it will do now is it will actually vary the amount of mix. So with the side slider at the middle notch, we've got 0. If I push it all the way from me, I've got minus 100% mix, 0. If I pull it all the way back towards me, I get plus 100% mix. So that allows us to do some flight testing. Set the aircraft up, full landing flap, your throttle, you've got your flight mode separate trim, it's on a nice stable approach path. Open up the throttle, and now all you need to do is swing that side slider one way or the other to stop the pitching and get the attitude that you want. Lovely. Then you can come back and lock the value in. Now the other thing we said was, we don't want this to start kicking in until we've gone above half throttle. So let's go to the curve, set it to be a 3-point, come down here and take the bottom point up to the middle. There's a reason for this. I'm taking it up to the midpoint, and that's because I'm going to move this point along. Come here. Now if I move the throttle from idle to full power, you can see it's only operating in this half of the mix. So if I put the throttle to half, which is where I want the mix to come in, obviously the target's got to there. So we don't want the mix kicking in until the throttle's got up to there. We can move that midpoint by pressing the button here. See that? You can move points horizontally as well as vertically. There, 50%. So now there'll be no mixing below half throttle, but the mix to the elevator will kick in above half throttle. Do not use smoothing. Let me show you why. Watch what happens to the curve if we use smoothing. You see? So back here you'd start getting a negative mix. See how it's gone below the line? You only want to mix above the line, so don't use smoothing. And the reason I brought this point up to the middle, if we have a look at it, I'll take it back down. You see what happens? Because we've moved this point along immediately below mid-throttle, you'd start getting a negative mix. So that's why we want that up there. Okie doke. And there's one further little wrinkle we can try, and I'll show you on the servo monitor what we're up to. So let's go to servo monitor, and we've got some flight mode trim in there. I'll take that out just for the moment so you can see the true scope of the numbers. And let's see which way is down elevator. Okay, bar to the right, positive number is down elevator. So let's go, for the sake of it, on the ground. I've gone to full throttle. Now I can add in a mix by pushing the side slider. And I'll try pushing the side slider away from me, sort of rotating the same way as down elevator stick happens. And you can see, in a sense, it's gone the wrong way, as it were. So when I'm trying to, hold down elevator and push the slider, I'd be having to do them in opposite directions. We can make that better. So we say OK to that. And all we need to do is come along here and reverse P5, or reverse the master value. And go in there, say rev. So I'll take it out for a second. I'll push the slider all the way forward, which is where I'm wanting a down mix, and it's gone to -100. If I reverse it, it goes to +100. Whoopee! Back into our curve. So you can see now, if I rotate the slider in the same way that I would be pushing the stick, so stick forward, slider forward, stick back, slider back, and there we go. And that's basically it. So again, let's have a look at this. I'll take the throttle below half. So the throttle is about 1/4 throttle. I shall operate the side slider to give me a mix. Nothing's happening. I'll leave the side slider fully forward, and I'll start advancing the throttle. And when we get to half throttle, you'll see the mix start to come in. There we are. And that's up to 100. So we would put the side slider back to 0, put the model in its landing configuration, everything's nice happily trimmed out, and then when we're ready to test what we need, go to full power and start pushing that side slider, say like that, until we've got whatever value or it needs to stop the model pitching up too far. I mean, you wouldn't be looking down at the screen, you're just looking at the model doing that. Okay, that's it set. You come back off the throttle, it reduces the mix, and at half throttle there's no mix below there. And the other thing, of course, is that if we come out of the landing flight mode, this should move slowly with the flaps. So I'll move it to takeoff mode, and there you go. So as the flaps are coming away, that mix goes off. We would be left with whatever separate trims we had in any of the modes. Okie doke. Now what we want to do is lock that value in so that we're not using the side slider anymore. I'll go back to the landing mode. There we are. And we can read across here what the actual value at the mixer is. So we allowed it 100%, but it varies proportionally on the switch, and what we'd reached was 59%. So, wrong button, we can come across here and set that to 59%, and then remove the switch altogether so it doesn't affect it anymore. And that's it all locked in. I'll go to full throttle, I'll move the side slider. You can see nothing's happening anymore with the mix. And as I reduce throttle, it goes away below half throttle, there's nothing. Come up here, take the flaps off, and out it goes. So there you are. That's how you can, one of the ways you can achieve really whatever you want to achieve with this radio. Have fun with that, folks.